What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Stateside Footy. Of course, I'm your boy Steve, and man, I want to welcome you guys in because tonight's going to be fun as we are talking about U.S. soccer and, of course, the U.S. soccer landscape, and specifically what Major League Soccer, what their role is going to be post World Cup 2026, because there are some really good things that are going to happen as we move from World Cup into the 2026, 2027, 2027, 2028 seasons. Of course, the USL is going to be launching their first division. Because of it, competition is going to look a little bit different than what we saw after the 94 World Cup, which was an absolute monumental World Cup for U.S. soccer. And of course, because of that, Major League Soccer was able to launch in 1996. But now all of a sudden, the expectation levels are going to be a little bit different. And we're going to get into that this evening. Before I do, I definitely want to say, if you guys can, hook your boy up with a like or a subscribe. And make sure that you hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming Stateside Footy content, because tomorrow night the MLS live stream does return with a matchup between Inter Miami CF and, of course, the New York Red Bulls. That should be an absolute banger of a match. And, of course, the Hotspur live stream Sunday morning as Spurs take on Sunderland. That should be interesting as well, too. So there's plenty of coming up on the channel. Also on Monday, Jeff Lageson returns as we debate on the U.S. men's national team World Cup roster. That should be fun as well, too. So, a lot going on here. All right, let's go ahead and get into it because, listen, the difference between the 1994 World Cup and the 2026 World Cup is something that, listen, it's night and day, because in 1994, the soccer landscape in the United States was vastly different. As a matter of fact, the only outdoor league at the time was the A-League. At that stage, the A-League eventually turns into the USL down the road. But for all intents and purposes, the soccer landscape in this country was null and void. Outside of a couple leagues, there was the WPA, the WSL, the Western Soccer League, and for the most part, player development in this country was null and void. Outside of the occasional very good college players, nothing like it is today. But that being said, now that we're 30 years after the launch of Major League Soccer, certainly the league has improved from where it was even 15 years ago. Because of the expansion, what we have seen is ownership go from guys who were millionaires to guys who were billionaires. Cities have, kicked in municipal resources to build soccer-specific stadiums. Training grounds are there. And now most teams have academies as well, too. And so from that standpoint, it's vastly different. But that being said, with a World Cup on home soil, it does again change the landscape of U.S. soccer. And so the question is the role of what Major League Soccer is going to play into this role, play into the responsibility of improving competition. Also, the issue of competitive leagues as well too. It's going to be a very intriguing conversation. And so from that standpoint, man, I'm excited for this. Before I begin, I do want to say what's up to the homies on TikTok Live. I want to say what's up to the homies that are watching via X and also via Facebook as well, too. Thank you guys for tuning in. And, of course, those that are tuning in on YouTube as well, too. It's good to have you guys along tonight. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Listen, World Cup 2026 is going to be eye-opening for a lot of people because, generally speaking, in the United States, you have soccer fans that are already aware of it, that already watch it, that are diehards of it, and then you have casual fans. And make no mistake, this country still has a shitload of casual fans that do turn in every 4 years, just like the Olympics, right? And because of that, soccer is still kind of like encapsulated in a bubble because, again, we still have people in this country that look at it as a European sport. And dare I say it? Okay, well, listen, it's also, some people also look at it still as a socialist sport, as they did in the 1980s. And so from that standpoint, yeah, there's still a lot of barriers in this country. But that being said, I will say that for the most part, soccer is a mainstream sport. It's also one of the fastest growing sports in this country. And so from that standpoint, it's improved leaps and bounds. But that being said, when you have a World Cup and you see the top level of soccer, that's where the leagues have to pay attention to this, because as of right now, Major League Soccer isn't even the top flight of choice in this country. We know this because metrics have said that the Premier League is the most watched league in this country, followed by Liga MX, which is the Mexican top flight, and then you have Major League Soccer. Underneath that, you have the USL, and of course, the USL does okay when it comes to TV. They have a CBS deal, which does really well for that league. And of course, in a couple of years, they're going to launch their first division and institute promotion and relegation. And so from that standpoint, I think there's a lot of curious eyes that are looking at USL to see exactly if the Pro-Rel model can actually work in this country. Me personally, I think it would. But there's a lot of people that actually appreciate the closed model of Major League Soccer. And so from that standpoint, it's going to be interesting to see how that gets implemented. But what I will say, from a Major League Soccer standpoint, being the top flight, they do have a responsibility when it comes to the landscape of the beautiful game in this country. And I think really what competition to me looks like is, okay, cool. So now that the entire country has seen exactly what the very best of this game looks like, what does it mean from a competition standpoint? And from that standpoint, we are first going to talk about the salary cap, because that has to be something that needs to be addressed. Okay, so first and foremost, because you're looking at players that are making a couple $100,000 a week when it comes to wages, you're seeing what some of these European leagues, as far as transfer wages goes. Now, certainly, Major League Soccer is not going to turn into that because of the salary cap. But that being said, what Major League Soccer has to realize is, because the infrastructure is in place, and because the revenue drivers are far and away better than what they were 15 years ago, that it is time to raise the salary cap. Last year, the 2025 salary cap was set at $5.95 million. $5.95 million, and that's not including your DP salaries. Of course, DP salaries, the designated player, each team has 3. And of course, those numbers do not count against the cap. But because of the roster mechanisms that are in place, this is exactly what most teams have to work with as far as roster building, and it does not allow teams to build depth for the amount of competition that Major League Soccer teams play, whether that be the CONCACAF Champions League, whether it be the U.S. Open Cup, Leagues Cup, league play, whatever the case may be. Entering 2026, the cap did go up to $6.425 million, which is only an increase of $475,000. And that was the increase in which Major League Soccer teams had to rebuild, reload, whatever the case may be. And of course, in the case of my beloved Seattle Sounders, we did absolutely nothing. But the reality of this is, post World Cup 2026, it means raising the salary cap to a level that actually matches the revenue in which teams are able to generate. Not just teams when it comes to private sponsorship deals, naming rights for their stadiums, whatever the case may be, but also league revenue as well too. And from that standpoint, owners now are in a position, again, this is not a situation where owners' wealth are generated in millions. It is now billions. And of course, with city municipalities kicking in for soccer-specific stadiums, all of a sudden the landscape has shifted, and teams are able to generate revenue in which they weren't before, which means that owners actually can spend above what the cap is currently at and still be able to generate revenue. And so from that standpoint, especially when this thing moves to a European schedule, and the competition, and then, and depending on exactly how rosters are actually going to be built, it's going to allow this league to raise the level of competition, not just within the league itself, but also when you consider the outside competition as well too. And I mentioned that the USL is going to be launching their first division, which is actually something special. But the reality is that is going to be a league that is going to be funded accurately, and it's also going to be a non-capped league as well too. And so from that standpoint, that league is not going to have the same roster mechanisms that are going to be in place. Now, granted, I don't expect USL first division teams to spend crazy loads of money, not right out of the gate. That's probably not going to be something that's going to be for a while. But that being said, when you're looking at the rub from what World Cup 2026 is going to be, there's probably going to be a groundswell for USL sides, especially as certain teams are going to be moving into that first division. And you're going to have new fan bases and some of these things. And the expectation is that the USL first division is going to at least start off with a bang. And so from that standpoint, Major League Soccer is going to have at least a 2-year head start before that sets in. And it's going to, it's also going to have a, they're going to be in an advantageous position where they could do some, they can do themselves a favor by upping that salary cap and bringing in a different caliber of player, but also from the standpoint from the fans as well too, because up to this point, yes, diehard soccer fans are going to be diehard soccer fans and they're going to be following their teams. Okay, great. But again, casual fans that are going to be tuning into this one with the understanding of what they're watching is the very best. And so how are you going to convert casual soccer fans in this country to actually pay attention to, say, whatever team is in their city? Well, one of the best things that you can actually do for yourself is, raise the level of competition. And now that's, whether that is bringing American players back from overseas, or opening doors to Europe where otherwise you wouldn't be able to open the doors to Europe, whether that be with straight transfers or whether that's loans for young players, whatever the case may be, it is an opportunity for this team, for this league to expand its talent base. Currently, it is potentially a South American player, or whether that's interleague transfers. So far, I mean, the development within this league has gotten better, but certainly, the pathways for academy players generally aren't there. And of course, because this league is still bringing in stars from overseas, aging stars from overseas, it does not necessarily create those type of pathways. So we don't necessarily see homegrown players. We don't see the league, put their advertising arm behind certain players. They don't necessarily market, some of our homegrown players. And so from that standpoint, Major League Soccer is kind of in this weird little impasse. But that being said, when it comes to the salary cap, I'm certainly not recommending that they rip the Band-Aid off, because there's never going to be a situation where Major League Soccer is going to do that. This league is always going to stay a salary cap league, whether we like it or not. But that does not, as far as I'm concerned, that does not necessarily mean that they can't up the cap in a big way. Because really, what every single team needs in this league is the ability to build a roster, to their ability to build the roster exactly the way they want, meaning there should not be any type of roster cap, right? You're only allowed 25 players or 26 players. Throw that out the window, because raising the salary cap is going to allow a team to build depth a proper way. And that's something that we're seeing right now in Major League Soccer, where especially if teams are competing in the CONCACAF Champions League, and whoever, like what LA Galaxy, Seattle, LAFC, Nashville, these teams are not necessarily ready or prepared, not just for the CONCACAF Champions League, but also rotation in the league as well too. And this is where Typically, we see injuries in this league, and of course, certain teams are not necessarily going to be able to recover. And so, from that standpoint, if you actually had two very good caliber players at any specific position, if not three, you're going to be able to rotate properly, and you're always going to be able to carry that same level across, regardless of the competition. As of right now, that's not necessarily the way that we see it, especially when it comes to the DPs. And I'm getting to the DPs in just a second, because usually after a DP, that level drops absolutely significantly. And so from the standpoint of you're spending, let's say, $15 million on a DP striker, and that striker goes down for any length of period, your backup striker is generally going to be at the Major League Soccer level, if not a little bit lower. And so from that standpoint, your production value goes down. When your production value goes down, good luck. Good luck trying to even convince your own fans that it's worth buying a ticket to, or tuning into, Apple TV to see it, man. And so from that standpoint, having a salary cap that kind of matches revenue, or at least still being able to stay competitive while you're still able to draw that revenue, is something that's massive. Me personally, I would like to see it at the $15 to $20 million mark. And from that standpoint, you're going to be able to open up better doors. I've been saying this for at least the last 5 years, that Major League Soccer should be dipping their toes into the European markets for young players that are on the cusp of getting their first, real professional contract, coming over to Major League Soccer for a couple years, earning that money, and also, being in a good environment where you're going to be able to develop. Also, raising the ground floor when it comes to talent in this league. But the problem with that is, if your salary cap is at 6.5 million, and you only have so many, you have these roster mechanisms when it comes to TAM and GAM, you have to decide exactly how you're going to be able to spend that money. And of course, with a loan, if a young player is making $40,000 a week, you're gonna have to pick and choose which part of the pitch that you're going to have to sacrifice. And so from that standpoint, maybe your defense is going to be less than it would. And personally, that doesn't do anything as far as the competition, for the competition across this league. On top of the fact that we have owners that just flat out just don't spend money. So from that standpoint, having a salary cap that will actually open doors would, as far as I'm concerned, would raise the level of competition overnight. The question of whether or not this league is willing to actually do that is another question, because I actually think that the powers that be that run Major League Soccer are absolutely deathly afraid, because they feel like they're not gonna be able to drive that revenue that would actually support the idea of raising the salary cap, which I think is a falsity. But that's just me. Speaking of DPs, I would actually like to see them remove 2 DPs. If you want to have one, fine, that's great, whatever the case may be. But the problem that I'm seeing in Major League Soccer right now is the fact that 3 DPs allow every team to basically overload attacks. And this is by design as well, too. And here's why. There was a time in Major League Soccer between 1996 and 2001, 2002, where they had a hard time getting people to either buy tickets or getting people to watch it on TV. And it was because the American audience couldn't stand seeing a 1-0 game or a 0-0 game. At that point in time, soccer fans were soccer fans, but even casuals had a hard time actually watching Major League Soccer. At the time, the talent really wasn't all that great. And so from that standpoint, Major League Soccer had a very big problem. All that changed in 2007 when, David Beckham came across. And then from that standpoint, we get into the DP area. And then, of course, a couple years later, they changed it to 3. And what we saw was teams obviously spending in the attack, whether that be striker cams, wingers, whatever the case may be. And what you saw was a wide discrepancy between attacks and defenses. And of course, it was by design because, not only is there force parity within this league, but the reality was that it created such a wide gap between attacks and defenses. And all of a sudden you're seeing score lines, you're seeing 4-1 matches, you're seeing, 4-2, 5-2, some of these type of these type of lopsided games where, most of the team's budget would go to their attack, and their defenses were either left to veteran defenders from across the leagues, or you started seeing the youth movement on the defensive side of the ball. And from that standpoint, here we are today, and that still rings true. Nobody spends their DP money on defensive side. Very rarely do you see DPs being used at the 8 or the 6 position. I think Miami had Sergio Busquets on a DP, but that was the exception, not the rule. But the reality is that what we're seeing is pathways for young American attackers not being able to develop within the league, not being given those opportunities. But at the same time, you're also seeing young defenders absolutely being shredded by very good attacking players. And from that standpoint, some of these young defenders aren't being developed because quite frankly, some of these players lose their confidence before they have the ability to. And so from that standpoint, you're starting to see teams now reach outside the league to bring in some better defenders as well too. But that being said, the discrepancy because of these roster mechanisms, again, the quality is not going to be at that same level. And so from that standpoint, the product is a little not great. Me personally, it's not my cup of tea. I don't have a problem with a 0-0 match, especially if you're watching two very good attacking teams struggle to break down a low block. Me personally, I like the chess match, but then again, I'm also a soccer fan, so it doesn't necessarily bug me. And I understand the reasoning behind it. But that being said, with TAM and GAM, it forces you into a specific player. Because again, because of these roster mechanisms, you're only going to have so much money at a certain level, right? So DPs don't count against the cap. But that being said, if you want to spend $1 million or $1.5 million on a player, it gets slotted under TAM, and then of course anything under $500,000. But that being said, if you've spent on 4 players or 3 players using TAM and you don't have anything left, but you still have a center back position, a goalkeeper, or a left back or a center defensive mid that you need to plug, and all you have is general allocation money, GAM, there's only a certain level that you're going to be able to afford. And so from that standpoint, you're not doing your roster any service. And me personally, I don't like it. Because again, teams should be able to build a roster however they absolutely want without having these type of essentially handcuffs attached to them. And again, you can still be able to build out a roster with a salary cap without having these stupid mechanisms in place where you're essentially telling a team like straight up, sorry, you spent your money this way. Like you should not tell teams how to spend their money any given way. The only thing that you have to tell a team is like, okay, cool, 25 million. This is it. You can't spend more than that. Fair enough. Cool. We're going to figure this out. We have, we employ people that understand, we have capologists that are going to help us navigate this. And from that standpoint, we're going to be able to build this roster, whether that is with youth, whether that you're going veteran, or you're even going prime, whatever the case may be. That should be the the standard operating procedure when it comes to building out a Major League Soccer team. But that being said, having 3 DPs and having these roster mechanisms in place has really, especially when you're coming to teams that don't necessarily spend money anyway, it's different. Like I'll give you guys a good example, right? there are specific teams in this league that choose to go young, and they're very specific on the type of DP that they bring in. And it's not necessarily going to be a sexy name. It's always going to be in a position. It's always going to be in a position of weakness where there's not necessarily coming a young prospect that's going to be coming through. New York Red Bull does this exceptionally well. Philadelphia used to, at least. Philadelphia's trash now. And FC Dallas is also another team that does it pretty well too, because they're not necessarily interested in winning headlines. But that being said, they understand that there's going to be 3 or 4 young prospects that they're going to bring through. But that being said, there's going to be a position that they don't necessarily have that immediate answer, so they're going to go fill it outside. But usually when it comes to, say, San Jose, it's a little different the last couple of years with Bruce Arena there. But historically, San Jose, Kansas City, Montreal, teams that can't get it right, teams that generally just don't spend money and also don't necessarily prioritize their youth systems. At that stage, maybe, it's not like roster mechanism is not going to necessarily matter for those teams until they actually, treat their product with respect. Then you also have teams like Miami and LAFC and LA Galaxy, NYCFC potentially, right, that will try to circumnavigate certain rules because all they really want to do is spend. And so from that standpoint, simplifying rosters actually makes it easy for those teams that want to spend. Teams like Seattle that want to spend but can't because they make foolish decisions with some of their veterans. Teams like Portland, Colorado, Real Salt Lake that likes to combine the both of them, but also doesn't necessarily want to spend the high-end money. That being said, it's going to benefit the league across because it's going to allow those type of teams to be even far more creative. And it's also going to, like, that's the thing. It's like, those are the teams that I actually want to pay attention to because they're already creative as is. And if you simplify roster mechanisms and allow a little bit bigger rosters, I swear to God, these teams are like, they're going to be some of the sexiest teams because they're going to be bringing in players that we never really thought of from areas of the world that we probably didn't necessarily see coming. That's the thing. It's going to be the intrigue in which teams actually build out some of their rosters. But as of right now, dude, it really is, paint by the numbers. And, oh, by the way, you actually have to fit certain players in certain categories, and it doesn't do well for the final product. We can get into refereeing as well too, because that's also a touchy subject. But we're not. Maybe we'll get into it a little bit later. But I do want to talk about this as well too. On top of salary cap and also roster mechanism, we have to talk about coaching as well too. And this is on the league as well too. I don't think people realize this, that individual teams don't give out contracts, right? All contracts are handed out by the league. And so for the most part, each individual team can scout and sign players, but their contracts are Major League Soccer contracts. So if you're LA or Seattle and you want to sign a player, they're not on that team's, they're not being actually signed by that team. They're being signed by the league. That being said, it's the same for coaches as well too. And for whatever reason, there's like this weird coaching system that's in place that is a system of nepotism, but it's also a system of, it's weird. It's who type of system, right? Where coaches advance because they kiss the ass of major U.S. soccer. They know the right people, and so maybe some guys are getting promoted up through the ranks that have no business being promoted. And from that standpoint, you see a lot of retreads at the Major League Soccer level. And what you don't see is good young coaches that potentially deserve the opportunity, or you'll see guys like Javier Mascherano, or like I guess the good example of the road that they should is possibly Michael Bradley and with the New York Red Bulls. Like that to me seems recent of something that kind of broke the mold a little bit, because it's a young coach that has good ideas, that did a pretty good job at the MLS next level pro. Yes, he is Bob Bradley's kid, so maybe that did probably played a big role. But the reality is, it's like that should be the want, and that should be the want of Major League Soccer teams, getting good ideas, good young ideas into first teams. But as it is, what we have is a revolving door of retreads. Very rarely do you see managers coming from Europe over, although Colorado did that with Matt Wells, and of course Phil Neville is in Portland. But the reality is two things. Number one, we don't see American coaches going over in learning. Jesse Marsh did that, and I think Jesse Marsh was good for doing that. He relinquished a head coaching job and became assistant for a few years, only to become the main guy over in the Premier League. But you never see that. But also in the U.S. system, our best coaches are either at the top of Major League Soccer or they're at the top of the USL Championship. And as you go down the pyramid to the youth ranks, you see some of our worst coaches. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, well, quite frankly, if you're a coach with any type of talent, you've already moved up. Whether you're an assistant, under somebody on a major league roster or a Major League Soccer team. But that being said, it's like the farther you go down, the shittier the development is, especially with some of these coaches. I've seen it on two different occasions in Washington and Michigan. But the reality is, these coaches that have no business being coaching, their salaries are tied to winning. And so from that, you see a lot of coaches that don't necessarily care about the young players. You don't see coaches that don't necessarily invest a lot of time into developing players because they are being paid to win, whether it's tournaments or whether it's in leagues at the youth level. And so from that, their systems aren't designed for development. And so from that standpoint, it becomes paint by the numbers when it comes to putting a team on the field. And, if your kids are halfway decent, they're going to perform. And then all of a sudden that coach that can win will move up the youth ranks. And that process gets started over again in Europe on a couple different levels. In Germany, it's interesting to watch the Germans develop players, because when you go to any club in Germany and you go down into the youth ranks, some of the best youth coaches in the world are in some of these academies. They have no desire to move up, and they're handsomely paid. And the end result isn't necessarily about winning and losing. It is absolutely about developing players, whether the club elevates them to their first team or whether they move them on. The reality is that the money that is spent on developing players is absolutely tied to making sure that the best coaches are in place, whether it's a Category 1 academy, a Category 2, Category 3, whatever the case may be. Most of these clubs are investing very serious money to make sure that these youth players are going to be developed correctly. And so from that standpoint, this is an opportunity for U.S. Soccer to look at their coaching model and understand that even at the professional level in Major League Soccer, it is about time to stop the retread in Major League Soccer and invest. Because if you're going to invest $15 million, $20 million on a DP striker, why wouldn't you invest $10 million to make sure that you actually get a solid coach in that is going to raise the level, raise the tactical level, and that actually lets some of the younger players actually learn from what a quality coach actually looks like, right? And so from that standpoint, I don't think the Euro snobs would have any issue with MLS players on national teams at that stage, right? Because if you invest in your coaching, typically speaking, not only are those young players going to develop, but the end product is going to look night and day different than what it has looked, right? Like, I don't know how you guys feel, but God damn it, I don't want to see Caleb Porter get another job in Major League Soccer. I certainly don't want to see Bruce Arena. No disrespect to any of those guys, but you've had your time. And it's time for Major League Soccer to look in a different direction, but also prioritize the youth as well too. Again, it is what it is. The money, it's weird because we have a pay for play model, and so from that standpoint, the youth clubs are a little bit separate from the pyramid. But that being said, it's like if you're a family paying $5,000 a year for to play on a club, times that by how many kids are on a team, you should be able to have the wherewithal to hire coaches that have a good track record of producing players. But it is what it is, man. The farther you go down, the worse of the coach that you see. And I do remember being in Washington, and my let's see, Leroy, hold on real quick. Leroy does say, does U.S. Soccer have a development team for all ages? My comparison for hockey. Yes, they do, right? The U.S. has the U23s, U21s, U17s, U15s, U13s, right? So there's different levels. There's different levels within U.S. Soccer when it comes to the youth teams. But that being said, the reality is that for whatever reason, even on the international level, some of our coaching decisions are less to be desired. That is my take on it, at least. But the reality is, it's like, for as much money as soccer generates in this country, the coaching is just absolutely abysmal. And the priority, especially in the youth game. Now, here's the difference, right? Because the difference within I guess you can say, U.S. Soccer, when it's tied to a national team, is a little bit different. U.S. Soccer used to have a residency program, and me personally, I thought that was actually a pretty good idea. I really did, because when you get a group of kids together under a very good coach for an extended period of time, a coach that not only wants to win, but also knows how to put players in the right spots in order for them to succeed, a coach with his staff that is, that actually is not only tied to winning, but also tied to development, because you want those players to move up, whether that's U15, U17, U20, whatever the case may be. That used to be a little bit of a priority. The reason why they stopped was because you started seeing younger players move overseas and going into professional academies. And so from that standpoint, U.S. Soccer decided to pull the plug to stop spending that type of money, because they realized they didn't need to do it. Because if there's a 15-year-old kid or a 16-year-old kid that makes the jump overseas, well, that club is footing the bill for that development. So why are we gonna pay for a residency when most of the time they're being trained in world-class facilities, right? So I understand that. But that being said, it's like, still, that money was not used, in my opinion, properly after the residency program shut down. But the interesting thing, though, is when I was, I want to say, in my early 30s, my niece was on the radar for the U.S. youth national team. She was a center attacking mid, and she was a very good soccer player. And she really started developing, like, for real, like at 13. And by 15, she was an alternate. But the interesting thing about it was watching her club and watching the way that she was treated, watching the way that the coaches were playing her. It was very rarely it was in her position, and it was always at the behest of the coach's daughter and her friends. And so she had to work around it, and she still did, and she still got her recognition. But with the 4 nights a week training, with weekends either spent in league or in some kind of tournament, she ended up quitting. And she was on the cusp of something that was potentially something special. And she ended up growing to actually hate the sport. And that's to me, that was absolutely sad. Because yeah, at the end of the day, right, the coach was only worried about winning. And for her, she was looking at the sport as something of a vehicle to get into college, or potentially something more. But that being said, it's like, she constantly had to deal with coach essentially prioritizing other girls. And you know, as far as I'm concerned, if you're good, you're good. You should be playing. And if you are a player at a specific position that is night and day better than some of the other girls, it is what it is, right? Like if you're a coach that's that wants to win, what are you doing? Oh, I understand. And so from that standpoint, she quit before she can realize her actual potential. And I always look back on that and like, but that being said, that dude was like every other coach in that club back in Washington. And it was sad, right? Because, you're talking about a kid that, potentially could have been something very special, only to see her resent the sport now because she had such a bad time, uh, such a bad time with it. And same thing with my nephew. My nephew here in Michigan was a part of, a local club, a very good club down outside of Detroit. And, he was a very good player, even as early as age 10. He was showing an aptitude, a very good kid who was quick, very good hand-eye coordination. And he was rarely played. And again, it's another situation of a coach prioritizing his kid and his friends, to the point where he didn't even want to show up for practice. And now he plays baseball, and dude is ripping it up as a baseball player. But again, another opportunity where a kid quits, because quite honestly, he's just not enjoying the sport. And unfortunately, that is something that is very common within the youth games here in the United States. It sucks, man. It really sucks. Coaching should be a priority when it comes to not just Major League Soccer and the USL, but also down in the youth ranks as well too. And it's just we see our best coaches at the top, and we see our worst down at the bottom. It's too bad. Lastly, I do want to talk about this, and it is, ending the retirement league status. And again, I don't want to restrict any team on what they can and what they can't sign, who they can and can't sign. If you want to, like, there's always going to be one of those type of teams that is going to bring in a Messi, or Orlando just signing Antoine Griezmann. Chicago still trying to sign Robert Lewandowski. LAFC brings in, Sonny. They also brought in Gareth Bale. They brought in the French goalkeeper a couple years back, and it's like, I get it. Like, you have tickets you have to sell, and your league's profile, your team's profile within the league matters, and potentially on a global level as well too. And so, if you're a star in Europe that's 31, 32, and you want to get your last payday, yeah, Major League Soccer is a good, is a good opportunity. But understand that it does nothing for the league when it with its profile. It does nothing for this league. Messi did, but he's Messi. 100% he's Messi. That was always going to happen. But now we're a few years on it, and the build up and the introduction, and that first year, maybe that first year and a half, it's not the same anymore, because we've all seen it, and everything has kind of died down a little bit, and now it's just Major League Soccer again. And that's the thing. It's like, initially, it does nothing for the league. Long term, it does nothing for the league. And quite honestly, I think it's a waste of resources. to bring in some of these aging stars. And it's, especially considering that most of these dudes are out of their prime, and sure, you might get a good year or two out of it, but at the end of the day, it does nothing for the betterment of this league. All it does is it continues this conversation about Major League Soccer being a retirement league, when really what this league should be and what it should strive to do is to be a developmental league. And that comes with not only prioritizing pathways for American soccer players, the domestic player, but it's also opening up the doors to Europe, and using that money to try to sway whether that's a player that's in its prime, maybe not top end talent, right? So what I will say is that, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Like, you're not going to convince like a 25, 26-year-old player that, is making 100,000, euros or pounds in Italy or England. But that being said, it's like, what about the dude that's in the Netherlands, or the dude that's in Italy, potentially, that's not playing for a top team, that's playing on a mid-table team, that's making 40,000 euros a week, whatever the case may be. That is an extremely talented player that will do more for the league long term, and also short term as well too, because for a fact you're getting 5 years of quality, or the youth, the European youth. Me personally, the resources that are spent to try to bring in an Antoine Griezmann or a Messi or a Sonny, where that potentially could be used, especially if the cap goes up, to be used to potentially bring in loan spells, 2-year loan spells with young English players, potentially even young Scottish players, young French players that could come into the league and can light this league on fire. And who knows exactly what could happen at the end of that loan spell, right? Maybe you're in a position where you might be able to permanently buy them for a price that it's that's not necessarily going to break the bank. See, there was something that was interesting that happened in Major League Soccer from like 2016 to 2020. There was like this opportunity to go into South America and bring in young South American players, right? The Miguel Almirons of the world, right? Seattle brought in what's his ass, the striker from Peru, who was like 26 at the time, Rui Diaz. Even going down and bringing in a Nico Ladero, right? You saw like a movement of very good young South American players. Cucho Hernandez came up, right? So there was there was very, very, very good young South American players that were getting their first opportunity to make money. Some of them went over to Europe, some of them stayed. But that being said, it's like, dude, what's his ass from Brazil? FC Cincinnati, who was with Portland. Dude, it was unbelievable. And all of a sudden, for some reason, that well kind of dried up a little bit. And it was beyond me why that well kind of dried up. Yes, I mean, it's still happening on a smaller scale. But that being said, it's like, as far as I'm concerned, all of a sudden, it went back to bringing aging European stars. So I was like, dude, if the Saudi League wants to do it, let the Saudi League do it. If they're going to spend their money, let them do it, right? Like there should be a conscientious effort from this league and its teams and its scouts to identify some of these younger players that are in Europe, even in South America, because at the end of the day, it raises the profile of each individual team in the short term and the long term. Not to mention, it raises the level of talent. And one of the things that I do like about Major League Soccer is the fact that it has become a physical league. It has become quite a pacey league. Some of the speed that this league provides is actually quite world class. But then when you take a look at like the discrepancies again from the attacks to the defensive side, so as soon as you get to the midfield, all of a sudden that shit turns. Right? So like very rarely are we it was weird. Like, it's weird, right? Because there was a time where the United States was very good at developing defensive midfielders, the occasional center back, goalkeepers. We were producing very good goalkeepers and D mids, and all of a sudden that stopped. And all of a sudden it's like you're kind of looking around. It's like, where is our bread and butter? Where is that position where not only does that reflect on the national team side, but also domestically sending players over to Europe? It's like, where is it? That's the crazy part. Like, for me, it seems like the pathways have dried up a little bit, and a lot of it has to do with the DPs around the league. 100%, I think that is. And it's also the TAM level players, because again, they're coming from outside the United States, and so some of those pathways have dried up. And when you're looking at player development, we just haven't really done a great job on the defensive side. But at the end of the day, it's like, I would personally like to see teams stop bringing over these stars, and kind of focus a little bit more on the domestic side. Even if it means, like, here's the weird part, even if it means bringing over U.S. men's national team players from Europe over to the league, I think that would easily have far more of an impact than bringing a washed Antoine Griezmann or a washed Robert Lewandowski to the league, because you're only going to have them for a couple of years anyways before they peace out. Does absolutely nothing for the profile. But that being said, it's like, man, I would love to see this league prioritize players that are in their prime, young players, and like literally raise the ground floor when it comes to this from this league's talent, 100%, without a doubt. Because as of right now, if they keep things the status quo, 10 years from now, the status quo will still be the exact same thing, and then you've wasted World Cup 2026. The groundswell that this country is going to get for the World Cup is going to come and go, and this league is still going to be taking small incremental steps. Meanwhile, other leagues around the world just are going to infinitely continue to get better, and U.S. soccer is still going to be third in this country. And it has a real opportunity to not just galvanize hardcore soccer fans in this country, but also get casuals who otherwise would wait another 4 years until another World Cup comes along. Because as of right now, there's a lot of sports fans in this country that treat soccer just like the Olympics every 4 years. And again, man, this league has an opportunity to capture casual fans in a way that even World Cup 94 didn't do, right? Because you have to remember, World Cup 94, as great as it was, the league didn't come online until 1996, 2 years later, and so they missed the opportunity to kind of piggyback off of World Cup 94. And I think because of that, initially it was like in that first season there was some intrigue, but after that first season it just fell off a cliff, because I mean the soccer wasn't really all that great, and it's understandable because you got to start from somewhere. But now we're 30 years in the future, and again, man, the infrastructure is in place, and you're going to get a lot of eyes on the game, and they are going to see the top level of what this sport looks like. If you're going to show somebody soccer for the first time, and you're showing them the World Cup, a World Cup final, that person's going to be like, oh, okay, I get it. I understand exactly why you like this sport, because it's entertaining as hell. And at the very best levels, it's compelling and it gets you. And then they see Major League Soccer and they're like, oh, I get it. Okay. It just doesn't, it just doesn't compute, right? And so from that standpoint, like really, really kicking on as a league, and and taking that opportunity off the back end of a World Cup to really raise the level of competition, raise a salary cap to a level that allows teams to spend in whichever manner they want to spend, is going to give this league world profile. And because the money is there, you're going to have players that otherwise wouldn't even pay attention, look at it and be like, oh, yeah, Los Angeles sounds pretty cool. New York sounds pretty cool. Seattle sounds pretty cool. I'm going to go there for 4 years because I'm going to make I'm going to make $2.5 million, or I'm going to make $5 million a season. Yeah, it's worth it. And I get to play in the US for a couple of years. Sign me up. Some kid that's 22, that's stuck on a roster because he's playing behind two incredibly good players. He himself is a good player, but playing time might not be there. You're telling me he wouldn't want to come to the US, make a couple $1 million, and just have fun for a couple of years before going back to Europe for a profit? Please. The name of the game should be raising the profile of this league to a level where it's undeniable. Now, of course, it's not going to be the Premier League because that league is always going to be better. Every single year it gets better. But what it can do is it can bring in better coaching. It can prioritize, development pathways. It could also do itself a favor by essentially stop bringing in these aging stars and prioritizing, players that are in their prime. And it will be better for it. Let's see. Stretch is asking, what jersey is this? This is the Seattle Sounders 3rd from last year. Yeah, I like it. It's my favorite. A little throwback to the 90s, back when the Sounders were an A-League side. But yeah. Listen, what I will say is that from the standpoint, I'm happy with where Major League Soccer where it was to where it is now. Because I remember when, Toronto brought over Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore, and I remember when Seattle brought over Clint Dempsey, and it was actually kind of big, right? Because I think at the time, nobody really expected Major League Soccer had that type of pull to bring some of those players back. But that being said, they paid and they came back. And because of it, it kind of raised the profile there for a few years. Those players could have stayed in Europe. They made they made the decision to jump. Listen, man, we had from 2015 to 2018, the league was kind of cool, man. I remember when Atlanta came online, with Joseph Martinez and Miguel Almiron, and took the league by storm. It was actually quite exciting. But all of a sudden now we're 10 years from that period, and we have new teams in the league, we have new ownership, and we have new infrastructure, but yet we're still playing under the same roster mechanisms, which absolutely make no sense whatsoever in my mind. We have cities that are forking over cash to bring the league to their city, but yet, we're not allowing the teams to go above and beyond to deliver a product to these fans as a way of saying thank you. Listen, we're going to compete at the highest levels. Not only are we going to compete in the league, but we're going to, globally, we're going to try to compete in the Champions League, and we're going to try to get into the Club World Cup. We have goals. Unfortunately, as the way things stand, a lot of these teams are not going to be able to meet those goals because, quite frankly, the roster mechanisms in place will not allow them to do it. And because of it, we have forced parity. It doesn't necessarily set a very high standard. And it also means that teams are forced to essentially sign players that, quite frankly, aren't good enough for this level. Some can, some can't. And me personally, I don't like that idea. And again, when you have the world's game in your backyard for a summer and you show soccer fans what it actually is supposed to look like, the league should have that responsibility at that standpoint to be like, all right, cool. We're going to try to up the level of competition. We're not going to get to that level, but we're going to allow our teams to, prioritize the players that they want. At the very least, at least the ones they can afford. And from that, you're going to see the ground level rise. And you're going to see teams look night and day better than what they had. And finally, Major League Soccer is going to dominate the CONCACAF Champions League. Like, it's not going to matter whether we play them in the States or in Mexico. Yeah, man. That is the ultimate goal. But again, man, it's going to take a visionary, and I'm sorry to say, Don Garber's not that visionary, and it's going to be interesting to see exactly who's going to be his replacement. By the way, Pro-Rel has never come into Major League Soccer. That's why I didn't bring it up today, because it's a fool's errand to talk about Pro-Rel. I think Pro-Rel should be a part of the conversation because, again, it is going to require teams to rethink their strategy, especially teams that are sitting at the bottom of the table constantly. And if there was accountability for them not spending money, it should be. And a meritocracy and your sporting accomplishments should actually play into it. But again, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday night. Tomorrow on Stateside Footy, it is the MLS live stream, Inter Miami versus the New York Red Bulls. That should be fun. And hopefully we see the Red Bulls actually give Miami a game. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how that one plays out. Inter Miami, again, one of those type of teams that was able to reload in a big way this offseason. So we'll see exactly how that looks tomorrow night. That should be fun. Again, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and hit the notification bell. And then, of course, on Sunday, we have the Hotspur live stream as well, too, Spurs versus Sunderland. And on Monday, we have a World Cup roster debate with Jeff Lageson of Prost International. So that should be fun as well, too. Plenty of good stuff coming up on Stateside Footy, man. Hopefully we'll see you there. Again, thank you for everybody that's tuning in from TikTok Live to X to Facebook to YouTube. I appreciate it. Take care, guys. Good night.
Rusted goalposts under faded